Trump's retreat, Europe's war. Reports that Trump was supposedly angry with Putin appeared simultaneously with completely different statements from the US president. A video was released in which Trump, in a rather aggressive tone, promises to personally deal with Zelensky, threatening him if he withdraws from the agreement on rare earths and other precious metals, which according to Trump should be placed under American control, not as payment for future shipments of American military aid, but for the previous payments. Meanwhile, he claimed that Trump supposedly said he was very, very angry with Putin for criticizing Zelensky and was ready to double down on punitive sanctions on Russia oil trade did not come from Trump himself. It was relayed by an NBC anchor, hardly a Trumpist, but rather a spokesman for the mainstream liberal media. The anchor claimed that Trump had just called him and told him he was very angry with Putin for criticizing Zelensky. One could say that there is some inconsistency here, so who is really angering Trump, Zelensky or Putin? In the first case, we have his direct words, in the second, only indirect account through a journalist. Consequently, since the criticism of Putin was not expressed directly, one can always claim that Trump was misinterpreted or that he never said it. Much more important is to ask what is behind Trump's vacillations. The fact is that in recent days it has become definitively clear that Trump's peace plan has completely failed. He had promised to bring Putin and Zelensky to the negotiating table and resolve the conflict quickly. However, both Trump's initial efforts and his second attempt to manage the situation in Ukraine turned out to be completely unrealistic. In fact, Trump simply failed to grasp the essence of the conflict and still does not fully understand who is fighting, why, and for what purpose. At the same time, Trump is certainly well aware that this war was started by his own ideological opponents within the US. He also understands that the war must end. It's not useful to him and does not correspond to the goals of his MAGA, Make America Great Again agenda. But he simply does not know what to do next, and so his first attempts to resolve the conflict were completely disconnected from reality. These attempts could have succeeded only with the political suicide of both regimes, ours and Ukraine's. Ours meaning, of course, the reporter is Russian, that is, Russia's and Ukraine's, or at least one of them. So far, Trump is not ready to sacrifice Ukraine as such, but Russia will not accept anything less. Of course, if Trump agrees to fulfill Russia's goals in a special military operation, Russia will be very pleased, but this will be Russia's victory, not some generous concession from a magnanimous gentleman, quote unquote. Therefore, the reason for Trump's anger and frustration is obvious. He simply does not know how to resolve this conflict. Meanwhile, Zelensky was already prepared to back down and accept any American terms as long as the military aid continued. But once again, Britain and the European Union and the globalists in America intervened, convincing Zelensky to break off relations with Trump and promising him European Union support in the war. Exactly the same thing happened during the first talks in Istanbul at the beginning of the special European operation by Russia. The same factors convinced Zelensky to tear up all previously signed agreements. Now they convinced him to break off agreements with Trump on the rights to Ukrainian minerals, even though earlier he was ready to hand over these rights to the British, who had promised him their support. Putin made it clear in Murmansk that Russia would not just push the enemy, he would destroy the enemy. This means that the war continues and nothing changes. And even if Russia starts building improved relations with America, this will not directly or immediately affect the course of the European Union. The war continues. This is evident from Trump's irritation, from the European Union's aggressive policy, and from Zelensky's terrorist tactics. It's also clear from the words of the Russian President Putin, who calls on the people and society not to relax. The conflict is not over because it can only end with the Russian victory, and for this much still needs to be done, according to what Putin says. And finally, the most important conclusion, Trump and the United States are gradually withdrawing from this conflict, but since it's not his war and he has not managed to end it, Trump will hand over the initiative to the European Union. He will leave the conduct of the war to Europe and to Zelensky himself. It's a Pontius Pilate gesture. Trump is washing his hands. Of course, he's doing it gradually so that the front does not collapse immediately after withdrawal of American support. This makes a certain level of de-escalation, but since the European Union is now taking responsibility for waging war against Russia, Russia can expect that the liberal dictatorship in Europe will intensify dramatically, and Russia is already seeing this. The leader of the French National Rally, Marine Le Pen, Macron's main political opponent, has been convicted on completely unfounded charges. As it turns out, George Soros has bought all the judges in democratic regimes. The entire judicial system is now ideologically activated and corrupted by globalizing networks. There's almost no justice anymore, neither in America nor in Europe. It can only exist in sovereign regimes. Where liberal democracy has been established, the entire judicial system belongs entirely to the globalizers. Therefore, hope for any legal resolution is no longer possible, it seems. Everyone is now on their own. To repeat, the European Union, as the center and headquarters of the liberal dictatorship, is now entering a state of direct war against Russia in Ukraine, while America is withdrawing and distancing itself from the conflict. And that is good news. The field of action for Zelensky's begging is narrowing, but we know how effective his blood-soaked clown has been in extracting money and military support from everybody he goes to. Therefore, the conflict continues, and we must be ready to wage it until the final victory, Russia says. At this point, the reporter says, I can no longer even imagine whether we will stop at the western border to Ukraine or not. The Europeans do not know either, because they themselves are doing everything to ensure that Russia will not stop in Ukraine in this war, Alexander Dugan reports. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.